What's happening, everybody? Thank you for being here at All Access Live with Kevin Rankin. It's Tuesday, January 21st. It's the week of NAMM. So if you're a musician or somebody in the industry and you're going to the NAMM show, let's hook up. It's my first time back in a few years since COVID. And if you've not been, it's an amazing networking opportunity. And if you're going, you already know that this is a great place to not only find a good gig, but check out all the greatest products that are coming out. And some of those presenters are my sponsor, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the amazing 5 Star Guitars helps sponsor the show. 5 Star is based in Beaverton, Oregon. So if you're coming from this channel and maybe interested in buying guitars or accessories, you can order at 5starguitars.com. And everything you buy online, there's no sales tax, so you save a ton of dough, and you're supporting the show. Also, if you're coming to this channel anywhere other than YouTube, do me a favor, just click another window, open up YouTube. I want you to subscribe to this channel. Go to the link below, go to youtube.com/@accesskevin and subscribe to the channel. You can also become a member, but it's free to subscribe, and you'll have about 340 other episodes of amazing guests prior to today's. I'd love it. If you like this one, share it, tell your friends. And so now this guest I was just talking about, if you're a headbanger and you've seen these guys on the road, you probably wondered who that amazingly handsome dude is in the background. Well, he's coming to you live from Atlanta, Georgia at his place. I've got Rob Hammersmith. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm great. Can I introduce you as the handsome Rob Hammersmith? Is that all right?
You can. You would be the first. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I talked to your lady. She said it was okay. So
Is that what she said? Okay. All right. Well,
something like that.
That makes me feel better.
Oh my goodness. Hey,
Yeah.
This is really fun, man. You'll appreciate this.
Okay.
Literally, so we're live right now. I try to turn on my do not disturbs as much as I can, but I have to leave the channel open for the gigs, right? So my band just texted, my singer texted and said, "Are you guys good for October in India?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." And then he corrects himself, Indiana. Damn it.
They're close. I could see where that would happen. Yeah. Well, go ahead and handle your business. I can charm your audience while if you have any gigs, if you have any contracts you need to look over. I'll hold down the fort here.
I think you'd be the right the person to agree that you just yes is always the answer, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So here's you say that I was recently, I say recently, in my life over the last couple of years, it has come to my attention that my immediate reaction when I'm asked to do something is to say no. And at some point in my life, I figured out why that is. Because oftentimes I can change. So if it's a dinner party or if it's anything that I need a few minutes to get my head around, I can take a no back, but if I say yes, I'm committed right out of the gate. So I've recently been told that no is my go-to answer, and that's not a good thing. So there's a little life lesson for me.
Yeah. All right. So people, if you're out there and you're looking for the next gig, don't take Rob's advice. All right.
Yeah, exactly. I'm definitely not a role model. I'm definitely not. If you call me now, I'm going to say yes because I've learned my lesson. So please, by all means, call.
Well, Ringo was actually just in the chat here. I see Ringo Starr was looking for a drummer for the All-Star band.
All right.
But I guess Greg couldn't do it. So, but Rob says no. So I'll let him know that's not a good.
Should I have not told that story?
Yeah, no, it's not going to cost you a gig, I don't think.
Yeah, all right.
Do you know? You probably know Greg Bissonette, right?
I have met him in passing on 3 different occasions. And you mentioned NAMM at the beginning of the show. Oddly enough, at NAMM events each time, that's where I have crossed paths with him. He's wonderful. He's obviously an inspirational person. He's been wonderful each time I've interacted with him. I wouldn't say that we know each other, but we have met a few times throughout the years.
I've got his brother on the show tomorrow.
I was going to say, is that tomorrow? Yeah. Okay, that's great.
But yeah, I'm wondering if because I've met him at NAMM and I've seen him do the Ringo's All-Star Band before too.
Yes.
And I've seen him at a bunch of. I saw Matt and Greg play together with the David Lee Roth thing way back in the day. But as a sibling of other musicians, I'm always trying to be cognizant of their own sort of their own progress, right? So I had Dolly Parton's sister on a couple years ago, and she's incredibly talented. She had 42 albums out. She had a record deal by the time she was 17. She looks and sounds just like her sister, but I don't
Interesting.
know anything about her sister because I'm sure
Yeah.
everybody, and she was super cool about, just talking about family. But afterwards, she said, "Thank you. I've probably done 10,000 interviews, and nobody's ever just asked me about me." And
That's great.
so
Yeah.
tomorrow, I'm going to try and
Yeah.
hold myself to that. I mean, Matt is certainly accomplished. The dude's playing with Elton John. He's
Dude,
playing.
yeah, his resume, I mean, it's pretty impressive. I think it's startling. But you're right, to a certain degree, I guess he's kind of flown under the radar. And maybe not
Yeah,
so much
well,
outside of maybe not so much inside the bass world or in the music community, but I think outside of the music community, he has certainly flown under the radar.
yeah. Well, I would imagine Elton John's probably not looking for somebody to try and upstage him, right?
Probably not, probably
But
not.
I mean, David Lee Roth wouldn't have either, right? That's certainly
Yeah,
something
well,
that like,
but Billy Sheehan was a name, right?
oh
So,
man, and talk
yeah.
about a showman and Vi,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly, exactly. So I guess it could work. Who knows?
dude, we're talking Elton John and David Lee Roth, but we're kind of skipping over the reason that you and I are chatting right now is because you're drumming with this iconic hard rock band from the 80s and 90s, Skid Row. I watched the interview that you did with your buddy there in Atlanta about the formation of, well, the sort of pairing, how you
Yeah,
and Rachel,
yeah,
connected, and if
that's
we
right.
can go over some of that story because it's a cool story.
It's
But
uh, it's an
I want to
entertaining
know where you're
story, is it
from
not?
originally, though.
Okay. So I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, just
Okay,
outside of Buffalo, New York. And anybody who's been to Western New York or the Buffalo area, anybody who's visited that area or spent any time there knows you don't have to get too far outside of Buffalo before you're in rural Western New York, the countryside. And I grew up about 45 minutes to an hour south of Buffalo, but spent a lot of time. I have family. I still have family to this day in South Buffalo area, and in and around Buffalo proper. So I claim Buffalo as my hometown, but I really grew up outside of Buffalo.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, we're probably gonna have to talk about Tonawanda and the Riviera Theater with the
absolutely.
killer
Yeah,
place, man. What an
yeah,
awesome
I love
venue.
it. That's a great venue. Great venue.
I'm
Unfortunately, that was not when I was living in the area. I don't believe that was if it was If it was there, I don't believe it was the Riviera at the time, and I could
okay.
be mistaken, but it's a great venue. They've been doing really well. There's all kinds of cool shows that go through there that I wish were going through there when I was still living in the
I'm
area.
sure. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
they have, like, one of the very few Wurlitzer organs, the entire organ system, right, throughout the whole
Okay.
thing, so,
No
with all the
kidding.
percussion and I mean, you've seen, like, a proper Wurlitzer, right? Like, with
Yes. Oh, yeah.
they've got the whole orchestra against the wall, all piped in through the walls, and
Yeah.
that place has it dialed, but,
Okay, so
I
saying that, there has to be a lot of history in that room.
yeah.
I I'll have to go back and do some research. Maybe I just missed that when I was growing up in the area, which would be a shame.
Yeah, well, you were checking out the other rock and roll spots of Buffalo.
That's right. That's right.
I would imagine if you grew up in rural Buffalo, the allure of all the other sort of, populated areas that had music as a focus, do you mind me asking how old you are?
I'm 51. 51 years
Okay.
old.
All right. So you're a couple years younger than me. I grew up
Okay.
in rural Montana, right?
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
all I wanted to do was get to LA, Sunset Strip, man, that was
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
The thing was still happening. And all my
Yeah.
buddies went right after high school. I stayed
Okay.
behind, went to college, and I felt like I was selling out because I didn't go and like eat tuna out of, a can and live on the strip.
That's
I'm the
right.
only one of any of those friends that's still playing right now. So I think
Interesting.
that
Okay.
worked out.
All right.
But for
So
you,
the
growing up in rural, upstate New York, man, were you drawn to maybe want to get to the city and down to New York or?
I definitely was as a kid. When I look at back on it now, I have a really fond I have fond memories of growing up in a really small town. But when you're in it, when you're in the moment and you're trying to figure out who you are and what you want to do, I just couldn't get out of there fast enough. Like a
Yeah.
lot of kids, right? And I think that's good. I think as a young person, you're supposed to want to see the world and get outside of your comfort zone and push yourself and just kind of try to grab all these things that the world has to offer. And for me, when I was a kid, I didn't appreciate the 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 charm and a lot of the things that were around me at the time. I just couldn't wait to get out. But you described exactly what a lot of us were doing at the time. So this is pre-internet, and this is obviously, I mean, we didn't have all these things that we have now. That's kind of shrunk in a lot of ways. It's shrunk the world down. So we can all look at
Right.
pictures of far off exotic places. We can read about them. We can do all these things. But when you're a kid, it's all we knew was like MTV and the radio and these and that's not all we knew, but that was the majority of what shaped my impression of what it meant to be a young kid wanting to play in a band and going off and attempting to do it in this mysterious far off place. And I'm exaggerating, but that's how the mind of a kid, a teenager works, right? So when I was a kid, I could not wait to get out of that small town. I just could not get out of there fast enough. But now, like I said, as I grow up and I'm raising a child and I have a family, it's natural to look at that with a completely different perspective. So for me, you mentioned uh, the hard rock world and the time that you and I were growing up and learning to play and playing in bands and then coming to that realization that we wanted to do it. I would say the majority of that was because of I guess the MTV era and what was going on and that whole time in music. That was really inspiring for me. So that led me to just get out of there as quickly as I could.
And you're in Atlanta now. So was Atlanta the destination spot after upstate or?
Never, never.
Okay. All
No,
right.
I'm not sure it's my destination, and I've been here for I came here with the intention of staying for 3 weeks, and that was about 26 years ago. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, it was never the destination. I I had some friends, some guys that I had grown up with and had gone to high school with that were already living here in the Atlanta area, and they were playing music and had established some roots here in the Atlanta area. I made a lap around the country over the course of maybe 2 or 3 years. Lived in California, Southern California for a little while, different parts throughout New York State, and really didn't know what my next move was. And at the time, mid 90s through the late 90s, the Atlanta music scene, and specifically the rock scene, it was really it was a really good scene here. It was a really good time to be here. So, knowing that and knowing that I have a couch to sleep on, I have friends that are there. I love telling this story, but they were all under the impression that I was coming for 3 weeks, and I showed up with a U-Haul trailer and my buddy's Chevy
oh,
Blazer behind me. My buddy drove down from Rochester, New York. He had a Chevy Blazer pulling a U-Haul trailer, and I had my car just packed with everything I owned at the time. And I remember when I got here, those guys kind of looked at each other like, "He's not going home, is he?
oh,
He's here."
yeah.
So that had a happy ending. It's been good to me, but it was never really the destination. So I don't know if I just ran out of energy and didn't want to move again. But I was already packed. I had everything in a little car sitting in their parking lot. So
And a network of people that'd let you crash in their couch is good, man. I mean, if you've got,
absolutely,
that
absolutely.
that's Southern hospitality right there, you know?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
eh
So, as a young musician, and I'm sure you can relate to this, yeah, having a network of couches, and that seems like a ridiculous way to phrase it, but that's like money in the bank, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, you talk about the '90s in Atlanta being a big thing for the rock. I mean, when I think about mid-90s Georgia, of course, you think REM, right? You
Of
got
course,
Athens,
yeah, yeah.
there was a band late '90s that I was a fan of that never really broke commercially, but Family Force 5 is a band from
Oh
there.
my gosh, yeah, yeah.
Love that band, man, and
Yeah,
I
so they were a really cool hybrid of, like, the rap rock thing.
yeah,
I call it that, and maybe looking back on it, that's not exactly what it was.
I think so.
But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I
they were a great band.
they So that band was one of the only, do you know Spawn drums
I
out there?
do,
Probably?
yes, yeah.
Okay, so I've been playing Spawn for like 21 years, man.
Okay.
And Brian Spawn, owner of that company, liked, I think that the guys in that band so much that that whole band was sponsored by Spawn. So
Okay,
he
interesting.
endorsed sort of the band. And I remember the only way that I had found them was doing some recording down at his studio in Chino, and he was
Okay.
maybe some stuff, and it showed all sorts of Spawn drums in the background. And I'm digging the drums, but I'm like, man, this band has so many hooks. And
Yeah.
I thought it was cool that they got kind of some support. I think they were big in like the Christian rock, rap
You're
rock thing
yeah,
too.
yeah, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
which is it's a whole different animal, right? Because that has such a rabid fan base. But
Yeah.
getting support, from different communities is key. So I'm thinking about Rob Hammersmith showing up 26 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia. You showed up without a band. You showed up not
I
having
showed
anything.
up yeah, yeah, my
Okay,
buddies, they played, so, one of my buddies that I was living with was a guitar player, another, his brother, bass player, and we would play together from time to time, but not as a functioning band, not as a working band. So I showed up here really with a clean slate, starting from scratch,
okay,
which is what I was looking for at the time. But then when you actually do it and you're in it, as you know, it's intimidating.
yeah.
One day you wake up and you realize, okay, now what am I going to do? Now I wanted to start from scratch. Now I'm starting from scratch. How do you do that?
Empty canvas. Did you
Yeah.
have? I mean, so you're probably mid 20s at that point, right, or early
I
20s?
Uh, yeah, yeah,
Okay,
I'd have to do the math.
yeah.
That sounds right. Yeah,
So I'm just thinking about being that, because I think you sort of feel invincible, right? If you're 23, 24, and you've got some chops under your belt, and maybe you've had enough gigs so that you feel like you're not intimidated by most venues or most stages,
right.
then you might even be unrealistically sort of brave. And I think
I I can admit that I was an arrogant little kid. I think
yeah,
that's the punk rock mentality, right? You just
sure.
kind of you convince yourself that you're scrappy and you're all these things, and then you grow up and you get a few years on you and you realize, no, I was just young and dumb, and I thought I
Yeah.
knew everything. I thought I had all the answers. Uh, that took me a long time to figure that out.
Well, I mean, honestly, as we both know, some guys never figure that out. So
Hmm.
they're still that
Yeah.
same guy in their 60s, But I,
Yeah. Well, you're right about
well,
that.
I was watching clips of you play, and I have to admit, man, I've not gotten to see Skid Row with
Okay.
you in the band. I haven't seen the band since way, way back, 1989, I think,
Oh,
probably
wow.
90.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it was prior to me leaving Montana. It was
Oh,
a
wow.
Bon Jovi Skid Row show. I think about right around 89, I think. And
Yeah, so they were touring the first record at that point,
yep,
correct?
that's right. Yep,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
and they were fresh, right? I mean, and,
Yeah.
and they were and seriously fierce. I mean, that was the
Oh,
thing, right?
yeah.
Because Bon
Yeah.
Jovi had already hit the sort of glam thing, and Skid Row comes out, and like, yeah, everybody looked the part, like the
Yeah.
sort of LA Sunset Strip part, but they were
Sure.
dangerous. I mean, it was like
They
that was
were.
like, oh my god, that's a band that's ready to throw down and
Yeah.
brawl. And I think there was a combination of things, that made that band work, even because, the band transitioned in the 90s when a lot of bands from that era were losing some of the success because the grunge thing was starting to pop in.
Right.
Slave to the Grind came out right around the time that all the
Yeah.
grunge bands were taking off, and
Yeah.
they still held the crowd, man. They still held the audience.
It's a really interesting, even from an outside perspective, and now I have obviously a very intimate knowledge, or I've spent a lot of time with the catalog, but from an outsider, when you listen to the first 2 records, uh, in a lot of ways, it's almost like a completely different band, but
Right,
somehow or another, they made it work. Uh, they definitely introduced themselves to a completely, I shouldn't say completely, but a significantly different demographic with the second record. Uh, and not a lot of bands do that successfully.
right,
A lot of bands
right,
try, and I think that's important. You look at a band that has a career, whatever that means, whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 40 years. Evolution is is often a key part, of that longevity. But a lot of bands aren't able to do that. And when I say not able, they're whether it doesn't land with their core audience, or trends have changed. And I hate to use that word trends,
Well, no,
but
but
that's
it's
a
right though.
reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I mean, I'm just thinking about it because that tour that I saw with Bon Jovi, you know who did that really well? That second album, the sophomore effort that just took off is Bon Jovi. And I wonder
Oh,
because
absolutely. Yeah.
Doc McGee was managing both bands at the time, I wonder how much influence that was from him saying, all right, if we're going to retain this success and actually go one step further, this is
Right.
what needs to happen. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised. I mean, Doc, he's genius that way. He does it,
He's a smart man for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
I um and so okay, so now we've talked a little bit about sort of like what happened, traditionally or historically with that band, and get into the 90s. At that point in the 90s, like you moved to Atlanta. What did you find any notable gigs right off the bat? Were you doing cover gigs, or what was happening for you
I
in that scene?
I definitely know notable gigs off the bat. I It's funny. So if you think back to that time, what it was like to play in a band, it was all ink and paper, right? So I mean, a lot of relationships and networking, but when I say ink and paper, it was flyers in music stores,
Mm,
it was magazines. We had our weekly here in Atlanta. We had what's called Creative Loafing, which is the weekly arts and entertainment magazine.
okay.
So every
Creative
week I
outlet.
would pick up, yeah, I would go through these ads and kind of start looking for things that spoke to me based on these classified ads for musicians. And I guess Craigslist is that now, but back then it was really more just getting out and meeting people and playing and paying attention. I would sit in my apartment at the time when I finally got a bedroom, when I got off the couch and we graduated to a large, once I realized I wasn't going anywhere, we got a larger apartment. So I now had a bedroom. Uh so I would sit in my apartment and I would listen to local radio shows and local radio, and they would do shows to support local music on these
Right
radio
on.
shows. So one was on like a Wednesday night, and the other was on a Sunday night, and they would do like a homegrown type of radio station. And I remember sitting in my apartment and I would listen to what they were playing on the radio, and I would kind of make notes if I heard a band that seemed like, okay, that seems like something I'd be interested in doing. Not because they were looking for a drummer, but then I would know if I go to see these bands, I can kind of fall into that scene and start hanging out with people that I connect with and I can relate to, and maybe have similar interests or similar goals musically. So that was really how it started for me here, is just getting out, spending way too much time in bars. But I think everybody at that age, I mean, that was just what we did back then.
Yeah, no,
It
and
was
honestly,
fun.
if that's the market, right, for the audience. I
Yeah.
mean, that really like if you're like me, 99% of the gigs I was doing in those formative years were all in bars and, those kind of
Yeah.
venues. You weren't It's not like
Yeah.
you went to theaters and sheds, right off the bat, but
Yeah, and
yeah,
I'm sure you were, but once you do that and you attempt to infiltrate, and I make it sound really exotic and like a spy movie, but once you attempt to infiltrate a scene or a culture like that, even if you weren't gigging or weren't playing, you were there hanging out. You were there seeing bands. I mean, we were just hanging out, but it
yeah.
was it was with a purpose. It was with a goal in mind. But when I look back on it, it was hanging out and goofing off, but it worked.
I mean, honestly, the thing is now, right? If you think about, and let me ask you, okay, so hold that thought for a sec. You said you have
Yeah,
one child, right?
correct, correct.
Okay, boy or girl?
We have a daughter.
And how old is she?
She turned 16
Oh, okay.
less than a week ago. Less than a week
Perfect. Well,
ago.
happy
Yeah.
belated birthday to her.
Thank you. Thank
This
you.
is this is absolutely relevant then. Okay, so
Okay. All right.
16-year-old daughter,
She's
does she have any
supposed to be
interest in
watching
music?
live from downstairs, so
Oh,
we'll find
okay.
out.
Well, you wanna give her a
I'm not
shout
sure.
out? I won't name her name unless you want to
All
say,
right.
but
I'm gonna give her a wave, and then I'm gonna
nice.
quiz her later to see if she actually watched the show.
Okay. Well, does she have an interest in playing music?
I she's a music lover, a music
Okay.
fan. But she hasn't developed an interest in playing an instrument. She
Okay.
did go through a phase. She did acting, a lot of singing, a lot of like musical theater type of stuff. Uh, but her life has kind of gone in a different direction over the last handful of years, which is great. We support what
Sure.
she's into, and so I was never one to really force it on her. I I've told this story and I laugh about it. When it was forbidden fruit, and she was really young when we first moved into the home that we're in, and I had a lot of music gear and drum stuff, and I was working on a space for the purpose of playing music, and I had my drum room, and I used to I I used to when she was really young, you'd have to, like a lot of kids, she's curious about everything and she'd be messing around with everything. And one day I decided, rather than being uptight about things and turning her off to the idea of playing music before she even has a chance to fall in love with it, I'm just gonna stop being a neurotic mess about this and just let her go for it. Have fun. They're
Yeah.
just drums. They're made to be hit.
Sure.
You're not gonna break anything. Let's do it. So I sat down at dinner one night and I gave the supportive dad speech and I said, I just asked for two things: protect your hearing and just let me know if you're gonna go in the studio. Just let me know because I don't always. And she was tiny at the time. Just let me know if you're going in the studio because I sometimes I can't hear you or I don't know where you are. So those were my only two rules. And the day I gave her permission, it was no longer forbidden fruit, and that
Oh
was the last
gosh.
day she ever went in the studio. So
Oh man.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I was asking about her interest mostly because you said that you spent, an inordinate amount of time in the bars and how maybe too much time, but kids, if they're interested in music now, it's crazy to look on YouTube or whatever, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and you'll see kids at 8 years old with crazy blistering chops, right? And
it's
they've been
it's
able to
amazing,
use
right? Yeah,
they've been able to use media, to so
right.
what we would do, and I'm just speaking mostly for myself, I would go into bars and I would experience the live thing for the first time. I remember sneaking into a bar at 16 in Montana,
Okay,
seeing James Sloan with his band Soma light up my world, playing obscure Rush tunes and like all these classic rock tunes with amplified drumming,
right.
and I would watch them play thinking that is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I mean, it's dangerous and exciting and sexy.
Yeah,
I'm watching all the dynamic of the guys in the band that were just vibing off the energy of the crowd. And girls were interested in it too. So
of
that didn't
course.
hurt.
Yeah,
Right. So,
yeah.
and anymore now, I mean, kids, if you're lucky, I think if you're a teenager and you're in a city that has live music scene that can actually get you into all ages shows, you know, otherwise you're kind of living off everything you see online. And
I think you're right. Yeah, yeah. And I
and
think there's
hopefully
a
you're using online to help, right?
I think it's a great learning tool, and obviously, as you said, it obviously works. The data is there. Like you said, you see so many young players who are so much farther along in the timeline than we were, and maybe it's because of social media we just know about them. Maybe those people were always there to a degree. We just didn't know about them. But I don't think that's true. I think that because of the resources we have available to us, like you said, there's so many resources to go to find out. I mean, you can do anything. If I need to do a root canal next week, I can
Right.
just pull up a tutorial and I say that jokingly, but I
Right.
think that you're right. What I am sometimes not crazy about, in a lot of situations that it becomes more about process than the art,
Right.
and it is still, to me, it's a very artistic thing. It's about creation. It's about that feeling I got when I would see bands. It was more about just the physical ability to play an instrument, as impressive and admirable as that is. there's still more to it than that. And
Yeah.
for me personally.
No.
So sometimes I get lost in the mix of where's the art? I need to find the art. And that doesn't necessarily mean playing a particular way. It means creation and the artistic process and things like that. So I'm not suggesting that that's not there for young people. I sometimes lose track of where to go for that
Yeah.
while I'm seeing some of the others. So it's all good at the end of the day. All of it is good, and I just hope that there's still a balance between the art aspect of it. I think back to we're talking about these young players and how great that they are. But for me, when I was a kid, the players and the artists and the bands that really changed my life and really spoke to me, it wasn't because they were great players, it was because of the art that they created. And yes, eventually I got to where I appreciated the great players as well. But some of my early favorites, I mean, you're talking about Ramones and Sex Pistols and early Guns N' Roses and early Clash and AC/DC and some of these bands. It wasn't about the technical prowess so much as it was the art. Image was a thing. Image has always
Mm,
been a thing, whether we
for
like
sure.
to think that it is or not. Uh, so I really hope for the younger generation out there. I know I sound like an old man when I say this stuff.
W We
I hope
are.
that I know, and I'm lucky to have gotten to that point, I suppose.
Yeah.
Uh, so where I'm going with all this is having a 16-year-old daughter. She is a fan of music, and although she doesn't play, and I'll tell you, some of the stuff that she brings into our home, into our household, it's awesome. So the
Mm.
artistic element is still out there. I just sometimes get sidetracked and don't know where to find it. Uh,
Isn't that
so
cool that you can discover it from your daughter, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, every once in a while, I'll be doing something around the house, or we'll be in the car, and it'll be her turn to or her shift to play DJ in the car or something.
Yeah.
Uh, and she'll play something. I'm like, this is great. This is absolutely great. And then she'll catch me later on adding it to my iTunes library. So
Yeah, like,
yeah.
okay, let me ask I usually save this question for the end,
Okay.
but one of the things that I love is finding out some people's guilty pleasures musically,
Yeah.
right? So if I was gonna
Yeah.
look if it's like your Spotify or your Apple playlist, if I was gonna look at
Okay.
that, what might I be surprised to find?
Okay. So I'm at a point in my life where I don't believe in guilty pleasures. If
Okay.
I like it, I don't feel the least
Yeah.
bit guilty about it.
Shouldn't.
I No. So right now, thanks to my daughter, I'm on a little bit of an Olivia Rodrigo kick,
Oh,
which
yeah.
might yeah, I mean, the
Bad
songs
girl.
are great, yeah, and I'll
Yep.
even go so far as to go back to Bizarre just to show you how much I'm going down the rabbit hole, which is
Wow.
her breakout television, series. So that's really kind of what threw her into the spotlight. Uh, I'm going so far back. I'm watching all the Bizarre episodes and laughing and having a good old time with it. But her music is great, and she's a
Yeah.
really as those younger pop stars in that whole world. I think she's got a really cool thing going on. Trying to think of what else might surprise you. Uh, I don't know. I don't know. That's the most recent one.
I had, I had Dave Ellefson from Megadeth
Yeah,
on, had,
yeah.
a couple of episodes, and I asked him that question. He said, "You know what, man? Most of us didn't want to admit, but at the time that I was growing up, disco was getting all the chicks, and I
Oh
would be
yeah,
listening to disco." But he wasn't, I said, "Well, if you think about like ABBA and Bee Gees and that kind of thing, which was disco era, I mean, there's
right.
nothing wrong with either of those bands, right? Those are such
Sure.
great bands, and it's about you talk about the art. Those songs are so beautifully crafted, and
Yeah.
when you mentioned the influences you had from some of those bands, you mentioned the Clash and Ramones, ACDC, early ACDC.
Mhm.
Um, those bands, I would imagine, if we were to take the formative years of like Rachel Bolan, the Skid Row, formation, I would imagine that all of those guys in that band would have said the same thing. That yeah, that the core because of the attitude, because the
Yeah.
part of it was the craft of the song, but the attitude was what made punk rock all of happen,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I think
and that
that's
was
that's that spoke to uh so many of us back then. What's interesting about the Skid Row context specifically, talking about the three original members, Rachel Bowen, Snake Sabo,
Snake.
and
Yeah.
Scotty Hill. Yeah,
Yeah.
each of those guys individually, they have drastically different influences, and maybe not drastically. There's a lot of common ground and there's a lot of
Sure.
overlap, but Rachel was very much a punk rock. He was a punk rock kid, and I say that I refer to everybody who's not my age as a kid.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
but he came from a lot of that, and then Snake Sabo, uh, very much a heavy metal guitar player, and specifically like new wave of British heavy metal, Judas Priest and those types of bands, Iron Maiden, that whole world. And then when I hear somebody like Scotty play, he's got a lot of what I consider to be like a blues rock influence, so like an Aerosmith type of thing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting thing, and I'm sure that you see this in your experiences as well. It's interesting to see you know a band as a particular unit, and then when you get inside of the inner workings, you start to see where everybody came from
Oh, yeah.
individually and turned it into something that although it might not seem like it to the average listener, it is actually a unique mix of three different people with three different backgrounds, and it's always interesting to see that as a music nerd. I like kind of sitting back and analyzing all that.
I totally, yeah, man, I get
Yeah.
that. And thinking about your addition to the band, I can speak from my own example, right? And so, I like my nickname since my early teen years was Heavy Metal, right?
Okay.
Those are stickers that are sitting aside for me to take to Nam with me
Okay.
as a joke. But
I'm gonna
I
get one from you this week, please.
yeah, you got it, man. I'll
Yeah.
be bringing it. But I was
Okay.
I was a hard rock guy, right? I was
Okay.
totally, like Scorpions were my thing when I was a
Yeah.
kid, and I was just obsessed with everything hard rock. And I would have not have pictured a flock of seagulls to be, where I'd
So,
end up in a big sort of time of my life.
yeah.
But adding and prior to that, Animotion, another 80s, synth pop
Yeah.
band. But
Yeah.
I was a hard rock guy coming into those bands, and it was what drew them. I mean, they all laugh and they joke about that they love having a guy that's a kind of a hard hitter,
So
and
that's a
great cool.
really and I actually wanted to ask you about that. So I'm gonna brag about knowing you for a minute. Your resume, when you look at your resume, I mean, Missing Persons and Tommy Two Tone
Mhm.
and these things that you've been involved in or have worked in those contexts. When I watch you play, it it's surprising, but I say that as a compliment because it's not what you'd expect in a lot of those situations. Was
Yeah.
that
I
was
don't
that
play like
bizarre for
Terry
you?
Bozzio.
Yeah, exactly. Was that bizarre for you as a player to step into a context and feel uh did you ever feel like a fish out of water when you did that?
Oh, I will tell you where the imposter syndrome came in, man.
Okay.
20 years ago, Jennifer Batten moved to town in Portland,
Okay.
and she had been touring with Jeff Beck, and Glenn Sobel was her drummer, prior to
Yeah.
that, and
Oh yeah.
so she'd play with Michael Jackson forever, right? So she had Jonathan Moffett, and she had
Yeah.
J.R. Robinson, like all the greatest drummers and greatest players. She shows up in town looking for a drummer.
Okay.
She goes to this jazz club and asks them, "Hey, I'm not looking for Terry Bozzio. I'm looking for a rock more Bonham guy." And
Okay.
so two people referred her to me, and she called, and I'm like, "This isn't Jennifer Batten. There's no way." And she wanted a drummer to come to play the World Guitar Congress in Baltimore with
Okay.
Eric Johnson and John Schofield,
Yeah.
Dennis Chambers, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, yes, I'll do it." Of course, yes was the
Yeah.
answer. Way before I heard her stuff,
Yeah.
then I got my ass kicked. Right, I've listened to the stuff and realized everything that Glenn Sobel was doing when he was 18, 19 years old
Yeah.
was next level. Right,
Oh
this is
yeah.
stuff that,
Yeah.
and I didn't know Glenn at the time. He's
Okay.
become a dear, dear friend of mine now. But I called her and said, "Give me his number. I need to go to LA and figure out how I can transform my playing into next level." And
Yeah.
she said, "Well, first of all, I wasn't looking for a replacement that played like Glenn, but he's cool and you'll love him." So I went down to LA. I said, "Dude, let me buy a day's of lessons, like a week's
Yeah.
worth of lessons if I had to." And he's like, "Man, here's what you need." And he just took me to the Rainbow. We went down to the Roxy. We saw the other bands, and he said,
You
"This,
need pizza.
totally." Yeah, he was more about, just saying, and you'll agree, you'll understand this. It's about the hang, right? I mean, if you've got some
I
fundamental chops, I couldn't sit down probably and play. I could not play with Dream Theater. I couldn't play with
Of
Avenged
course.
Sevenfold.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I was grateful that when Missing Persons gig came around, I played my first gig with them 20 years ago. And Dale was absolutely adorable, man. I mean, she, like whatever happened with her ex-husband, he's not in the picture in the band anymore. So she wasn't looking for a replacement. But
Right.
going into that gig, if you're playing a Missing Persons song, you do not get the signature parts,
That's
you're
That's
dead,
the
man.
key.
Like,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So
Anytime an artist or musician walks into something that's established, pre-existing, and the names that you're mentioning, I don't think iconic is an exaggeration.
right,
And while it's reassuring and great when somebody gives you some leeway to do your own thing with it and make it your own, it doesn't have to be a carbon copy of the original. I still think to a degree there's an obligation to not deviate too far from what people are nostalgic for, and I'm
right.
all about artistic liberties and evolving with it, and every player is different, and I love seeing somebody have a unique voice on the instrument. That's great. But at the end of the day, you're still when somebody goes to see whether it's Skid Row show, Flock of Seagulls, Missing Persons, you want them to walk away feeling like they had the experience they were hoping to have. So
Absolutely.
where's the middle ground with going to I just recently saw the Bob Dylan movie,
I
and I'm not
haven't
sure if
heard
you've
of
seen it yet.
not
But the
yet.
reason I bring that up is it's all leading up to this particular point in his career where he received a lot of blowback and it was very controversial that a lot of people felt that he turned his back on his audience and his core following. So that's an extreme example in the other direction, but as an artist, where's that line? So it's great when I hear you say that a situation like that they allow you to do your own thing and bring something to the table, but I would imagine from a player standpoint, you feel the pressure of making sure you still honor what is already there.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so let's tie that into then your playing, because I've loved
Okay.
watching videos of you play,
Thank
especially
you.
in the Skid Row, man. My favorite drum groove of any Skid Row song, probably commercial song for sure, is Monkey Business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That the coolest, like the cowbell hat part that you're in. You play it with such finesse and so much conviction, right? There's nothing
I
tentative or timid about it
I
at all.
If
You're just
you're gonna
laying
play
into
the
it.
cowbell in a rock band, you better mean it.
Yeah, that's it, man. And I just loved, there's precision there, but there's so much energy, and it's it's something that you can't. It's not you can't be taught that, right? That
Y
is the punk rock attitude of playing drums.
Well, thank you for saying all that. I think I would be doing your viewers a disservice if I didn't say that the original drum track, which is not me, Rob Afiso, that drum track, it's a very well put together drum track. In a situation like that, I certainly feel as though I have my own stamp on it, my own feel with it, my own voice. But it's a really interesting drum track on that original recording. So
Yeah,
from there, my goal was always to get as close as I'm capable of doing. And I do enjoy playing that one. But thank you for the kind words.
yeah. No, I mean, as drummers that kind of come into this situation, you mentioned the obligation that we have. For me, there's an interesting thing that's happened with a flock of seagulls that I think it's with every band that's sort of out there that's had a legacy sort of duration, right? I mean,
Mhm.
this term, the band's been around 40 plus years.
Yeah.
There are
1979, if I remember correctly. Is that
That's
were they
right.
40?
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
well,
amazing to
you are a
me. Yeah.
music nerd. Well,
I'm a bit of a music nerd. Yeah. Yeah.
then I'm sure you've experienced this.
Okay.
There's a strong contingent of fans of the originals that
Of
are
course. Yeah.
they're vocal about their opinion about
Yes, they
maybe
are.
the singer going on without all the original members, right?
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
I
You're
when I
being
first
very kind. You're being very
well,
diplomatic about this.
I would watch these forums, right? I mean, started back in MySpace, like what I would see on Facebook, these groups that had formed, and they don't know me, right? They don't know the other guys in the band. And when they
Sure.
would be talking about what a disgrace it is to move on without all the original members,
Right.
and you've seen it in every band that's out there. I mean, I think about the bands that are out touring now that have had so much blowback, Journeys and the Foreigners, right? These
Of
legacy
course.
bands that,
Yeah. Of course.
and from our perspective, yours and mine, right? Dude, we got a great gig, right? We're doing these songs that are iconic and wouldn't
Yep.
trade it for the world. And I, at first, it was hard not to take some of that stuff personally when I would read those things, because, like, man, you know what? If they knew me, they might not say those things online.
Right.
So I put them to the test. We played the Cavern Club in
Oh
Liverpool
yeah.
where the
Okay.
band was formed.
That's right.
And a lot of those people that were avid original fans that were very anti,
Oh yeah.
um,
You're
I,
in ground zero for something like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
I said, hey, you know what? Come out to the show at the Cavern. If you guys don't like the band, I'll give your money back.
Yeah.
And I met with a handful of these people after the show. Actually, I saw some of them beforehand, and they're like arms crossed, sitting
Yeah.
at
Of
the,
course. Yeah.
after the show, they're like, man, I got to tell you, first of all, it was ballsy to say it. Second, we love the band now. It's heavier than it used to be, and it
Right.
has a different voice,
Okay.
but you've done it a good honor, and we appreciate the fact that we can still go hear those songs that we love in some form, and
Right.
treated respectfully. And I remember my singer coming to me saying, man, don't engage, right? Because you can't win. And I said, but
Right.
everybody in the past had been their adversary, and I was an advocate to make these people bridge, some sort of appreciation. You're not going to win them all, right?
Well,
But I
it's impossible, right? Yeah. There are some people. I and I don't even necessarily fault them for this, although they can handle it in an immature way or an aggressive way, which is completely unnecessary. But you're absolutely right. There is a whole section of the music world that no matter what you do, they're kind of, I don't say a lost cause, but no matter what you do, you're not going to win their approval or change their
right,
mind. And you really have to be able to just understand that and accept it. Now, do they need to be nasty people while they're doing that? No, absolutely not. And some people don't seem to be able to stop themselves, and that's a separate conversation that you and I can have offline. But
yeah.
it's a really interesting thing. I think you're an incredibly brave man for engaging and stepping up and offer to offer refunds. That's a very brave move on
It
your part.
fairly smaller venue if it was the
Oh,
shed, but the
right.
cavern is tiny, right? So I figured at
Yeah.
most I might be refunding like 20, 30 tickets if of
And it's still
dissatisfied
more
people.
money than I want to shell out
Believe me,
after a
me
gig.
too.
Yeah.
But that was the fight I wanted that day, But
Okay.
I so with that being said, I mean, you guys have gone through transitions of singers. You had Eric, singing for the band for a while. That were like
Correct.
amazing singer. I know he had tons of health issues come up, and it
Correct.
really was too bad because it seemed like the synergy was there too. And
It
I don't know anything about it, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've summed it up. It's a shame it couldn't have gone further with him. Yeah, you summed it up. There's really it's all online, it's all out there.
sure.
Health issues and some things are just not meant to be. And it's unfortunate, but that brings us to where we are now as a band.
And right now, you're on the hunt. Is that correct? You're looking for
We are. Yeah, we are on an active search. It's been a long process for us. We're taking our time with it.
because I got
We
your
are
guy.
You do. Well, all
I got
ideas
your
are
guy.
welcome. You do. Okay.
Yeah. I
All
mean,
right.
honestly, he popped in on, I saw in the chat on Instagram. So if you guys that are watching on Instagram, I'm sorry that I toggled back over. I saw a bunch of you here. But great friend of mine, a wicked drummer who happens to be
Okay.
a badass singer, and he actually put together audition videos for you guys. I just don't
I
know that
can.
he knew who to submit to. So
Okay. Well, let's
Andrew Green is your guy. I'll get you hooked
okay.
up. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
he's
We'll connect. I'll talk to you after we get offline here and we'll figure it all
yeah.
out. But yeah,
We're going to NAMM together, you and I.
that's correct. Yeah.
So are you on the hunt at NAMM? Are you going to be, like, doing some networking down there to try
I
and
I yeah, I think as an organization, we're trying to do a as anybody would in a situation like this, leave no stone unturned and really do a proper thorough search so we feel we make the best decision for our organization and for our future. That said, we've had some strong candidates for sure. There's a whole lot of talented people out in we were talking about people online and what some of these younger people can do when you really start looking uh, at who's out there and musicians and singers and these people that are out there performing, whether or not they're right for us. I'm sure it's very similar to the context that you've worked in. It's a specific thing, and you're
Yeah.
looking for a specific you're looking for a specific thing. But when you start looking and scouring through these performers, there's a whole world of really incredibly talented people out there, and that's been fun to just pick through some of that and see what some people are doing these days.
A few years ago when Brian Johnson couldn't sing
Mhm.
anymore for AC/DC for
Yeah.
a while, right? He had
Yeah.
his voice. And so, it was such an incredible thing just to have Axl Rose just pop in, right? And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
Axl Rose is singing for AC/DC. Like, what kind of
Yeah.
weird alternate universe? But how awesome is that,
That
right?
was
Just
not on my bingo card. So, and
not no no one's
anybody who knows me, so AC/DC is my favorite band of all time.
right on.
And when I saw that situation unfolding, I will admit I was skeptical. I
Yeah,
had that reaction. I think like a lot of people, I don't know how this is gonna work. I don't know if this is gonna work. And I have to say, like a lot of people, after they started doing shows and Axel after he had performed and there was footage online, he actually did a really good job with the gig.
yeah,
I could pick it apart and just be a nerd
sure.
about it and take it too serious, but I thought he did a good job. And you hit the nail on the head. He was respectful with the way he
Yeah,
approached the gig. He really went out there with the intention, I think, of being a part of AC/DC. Not a lot of people, I think, maybe would have to resist the urge to take it in a different direction, and I was pleased with it. I'm happy to see Brian back, of course,
of
but,
course. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
it was a great tie over, right? I mean, what a
yeah,
cool opportunity because the people that got to see that band, I would have loved to have seen AC/DC with Axl just to,
yeah,
have that, in your coffers. But,
yeah.
um,
It
and
looks good on
honestly,
a
who
resume.
it, yeah,
Not
right,
that he needs to put
yeah.
a resume together, but
But his attitude historically was not a team player, right? And AC/DC was all
that's the
about
rumor.
team.
Yeah,
I mean, really, that
yeah,
if it wasn't the brothers and like, like really, I mean, when Bon Scott passed away, it seemed impossible that they were going to find somebody to be able
I
to
think you're right.
take that role. And just like, Sammy Hagar with Van Halen, for some reason, somehow it sounded completely different. It was a new band, but they were
Right.
still such incredible songs. I
Yeah,
mean, I think it's difficult, when you think about like, the formation of Skid Row and, those that you've got, Snake and Scotty and Rachel, as the formative, sort of foundation of that band. I mean, that's where that sound came from, like all those
absolutely.
songs. And so
Yeah,
been able to retain that. And then you've got, you got the canvas. It's already, you've got the primer, you've got all this sort of foundation in a painting where you've got somebody that comes in and does, some ornate detail. Um, Eric was a cool, compliment to the music. Didn't sound exactly like the original records, but he was a great singer and it sounded good the way Axl paid honor to, the AC/DC tune.
absolutely.
So when you get a new person in this band, and I'm thinking more about your situation in the band because, you, God, I mean, you came in having a foundation of songs that you're playing
Mhm.
drums in a sort of a core, you know, getting the core pieces down, you got your flair to it. But when you get a new guy coming in, um, it's like the family's established. I mean, you've been with the
Right.
band a while now, you know, so
Going on 15 years. Yeah. Which,
amazing, right?
in this business is that's a long
That
time in this
that's a
business.
career right there. Yeah, I
It
mean, a
well,
15-year
yeah.
career, yeah,
Yeah.
that and so having somebody come into this thing, where you know, realistically, you know, there might be a handful of years, right, where you've got a window to be able to
Right.
capture the audience that still can they're loving these songs, they wanna go out, they've got a little more disposable income than they might have 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
So they're still gonna go and they're gonna see you on the Monsters of Rock cruises and all that kind of stuff. And so, but you may have a window, right? Like, I mean, and realistically, I think about this with the Flock of Seagulls, right? A singer may have whatever 10 years, maybe, right, before
Sure.
you got to look at,
Sure.
you know, going to play golf somewhere, whatever, you know. So when you're thinking about this, you're thinking about a singer that can come in and bring this, you know, this band, you know, sort of put the cherry on this career.
That's right.
If you could get anybody, right? I mean, I'm talking, yeah, anybody out there, who's a dream player that you would have that has the
Wow.
attitude and still has a voice?
Interesting. Okay. For that catalog of music, that's a really good question. I see so many great singers. Wow, that's a really good question. I'm gonna have to
Thanks.
think about that. Yeah.
No, no. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, even
Yeah,
okay, so
you stumped me
historically,
on that. I was okay.
historically, maybe they've passed on, right? I mean, but
Yeah.
because I think attitude wise, like, you know, Steven Tyler totally had something that could
So
work with Skid
yeah,
Row,
he
you know?
I think so. And that's a name that I would have come around to that name. And the reason I say that, because he had it was a very thorough not products, but he was the total package, right? So
Yeah, right.
it is more than just the voice, but it's the front man vibe, the attitude, the confidence,
Yeah,
all those things. The ladies loved him, but the
the
guys were
moxie.
kind of yeah, the guys were kind of like, yeah, that dude's he's a badass, right?
Yeah, right.
So I that's not necessarily what every band needs. There are some bands or some situations that's not what's required for the gig, or that's not what's
Right.
called for. Uh, we are a band. We are a band that likes to do a a visual show as well and a high energy show. So
Yeah.
that's part of it as well. It's not just the voice. I would say Steven Tyler is a really good example of that. Yeah, there's been so many. I mean, you look at Paul Stanley has to be one of the best
Oh,
frontmen
yeah.
of all time. Love him or hate him, he's
Right?
a
No, but
we could do an episode on him alone and how divisive he is and different points in his career. But you want to talk about somebody who just owns a room of people and will have them eating out of his hand. And that's hard to come by, right? And that's what
yeah.
makes it so special and magic when it happens is you can't just you can't go and take a 6-week course and come out and be able to do that. That's
Right.
what make it that's what makes it so frustrating when you're looking for it, but it makes it magical when you find it and it falls into place. I but as I think about it, I would have to say he is absolutely one of the best performers, frontman, whatever you want to call it. He's certainly one of the most powerful personalities, and as far as a presence on stage, he's one that I would put up there on the list. I'm gonna rack my brain. I'll come up with a couple
That's good.
others. Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, obviously, when you were all doing hypotheticals, and
Yeah.
these are guys that are not looking for gigs, right? But
Right. Right.
I love those kinds of like sort of formations. You know, you've got, you know, the Mount Rushmore of drummers or Mount Rushmore
Right.
of
Right.
bands. You know, for you, all right. So taking yourself out of the Skid Row equation,
Oh, okay.
if you could assemble your dream gig, where, you know, present company aside from Skid Row,
Yeah.
but you're thinking about, all right, I'm going to assemble my bass player, my guitarist, my vocalist. Who would Rob Hammersmith's like dream band be?
Wow. Insightful questions here.
Man, we're
So,
working.
I'm gonna skip ahead. I'm gonna skip ahead.
Okay.
Uh, Rhythm guitar, Malcolm Young.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, for me, uh, I don't know if he's overlooked anymore. Maybe he was at one point in the timeline. I don't think a lot of people realize how much his right hand is a part of the AC/DC sound. It's
Mm,
just it's so it's a unique feel and a unique voice that he has, but he's so I say surgical precision, and that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but he just had that thing that he does as far as a rhythm player that is such a huge part of the sound of that band. And the band had so many different things. Obviously, Phil Rudd and his
yeah, man.
contribution and the voices, both Bon and Brian. Uh, Angus, it wouldn't be AC/DC. But, obviously, there's so many
Right.
different factors and components. Uh, but
But he was
man,
the hidden gem,
he really, I think
the
so.
secret
So if
sauce.
I'm, yeah, if I'm gonna put, or he's the one that I think sometimes is overlooked. So maybe I'm advocating for him now. I don't know why I feel the need to do that, but if I'm going to put a band together and you're going to give me the ability to just choose any name I can think of, he's going to be on rhythm guitar for sure.
All right,
Uh,
nice.
yeah. Let's see here.
Your bass player is key. I mean, as a drummer,
Yeah, yeah,
rhythm section. So who's your bass player, man? Did you grow
yeah.
up saying, "All right, that's my dude"?
Yeah. That's a really good question. There are so many great bass players out there. I should be better prepared for this. I didn't
That's okay.
realize I was
Well,
gonna be yeah.
if you had posters on your wall, who was the earliest poster that I would have thought, you know? Okay, so I'll supplement your thought process here for a second. Guys that I never would have picked before, but
Okay.
people that I saw this year. I went to the Sphere at Valentine's Day last year to go
Oh, you
see
did?
U2, and
Okay.
I'd seen U2 in the
Yeah.
past, um, but Adam Clayton blew my
Oh,
mind.
yeah. Oh my
I
gosh,
was like,
yeah.
that is a freaking rock star right there.
Yeah.
He outshined Bono on stage. I mean,
No
Edge is
kidding.
always
Okay.
understated, but Adam Clayton, like, I don't know why, but at that show in particular, because they have so much stuff going on, and they're on a square stage with no other props, where he just kind of lit up the stage. I was like, man, I never would have put. I didn't value his presence as much as I did that
Right.
time, and I've talked about it in the last year, thinking for me, he was an undiscovered sort of talent, and I would never would have. He's not a guy I would
Yeah.
have had on my wall, right?
So
But
it's interesting in a situation like that, I think I often find situations where when you really start going down the rabbit hole, you don't often realize what a massive contribution some members made, and there's a lot of people that maybe got the attention or had the spotlight, and that was their role in the whole thing. But but then you realize when you really start digging through the music, oh, this person's playing is a huge part of the sound, and if it
yeah,
had been anybody else, it would have sounded differently. There's so many
yeah,
so many musicians and drummers, and I know it's popular now. It's people make fun of Lars and things like that. And and I understand, I guess, where they're coming from, but he's the perfect drummer for that band. That
right,
anybody else, and it wouldn't be what it is. And I don't think a lot of
yeah.
people realize that in that situation. So I that
I
might be
mean,
one.
there were we have an army of sort of keyboard warriors, right? All these guys that are out there that are
Oh yeah,
armchair quarterbacks.
right.
If the internet hadn't been invented, you wouldn't find all the hate on Lars Ulrich.
Well, you're right.
And
You're right.
those first couple records, they sounded that way because of Lars' contribution. Yeah, so
Absolutely,
you're
absolutely.
right.
Yeah, he's the perfect drummer. I think circling back to my all-star band, uh
Okay,
Tom Hamilton on bass.
awesome. Yeah,
Can we do
nice.
that?
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Aerosmith. Yeah.
Yeah. I recently just did a session with a buddy of mine, and I was picking through some Aerosmith stuff, and we actually ended up tracking an Aerosmith song for fun, and that sent me down a rabbit hole, and I started watching a bunch of stuff on YouTube. And if you have a few minutes and you just want to want to be a music nerd. Watching from 1978, they did what's called Texas Jam, and there's a
Oh
bunch of
yeah.
live footage, and the band is just absolutely on fire. So I loved watching all that, which kind of prompted me to go back and start doing a deep dive again and revisit some of that old stuff.
What was the cover you did?
I'm not at liberty to say just
Oh,
yet
okay.
because it's
All right.
actually it's a fun little project. I'll fill you in when I see
Okay.
you later this week.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak out of turn. It's a
Cool.
fun little thing we got going on. So
No
I'll fill you
problem.
in later this week. Yeah.
Yeah, please. All right. So you've
Yeah.
got so you got your bass, you got your rhythm guitar. Who's your
Yeah.
favorite singer of all time?
Favorite singer of all time. Ah,
Uh
yeah.
okay, well there I mean that's catch 22 too when I'm thinking about
Right.
it, right? Cuz like personally like my I was thinking of a guy that would fit the sound of your voice. Like Miles Kennedy is a great friend and he's also an incredible singer, right? And he's got the Alter Bridge thing, he's got his own
Right.
gig, he's playing
Right.
singing for Slash. There's nothing he can't do and does a pretty incredible Axl, right? When he's playing with Slash, it sounds like
Yeah.
but and he's got moxie, he's got the vibe, he's sort of the whole package. So he's
Right.
probably like my favorite singer in the biz historically. I don't know that you could find a more pure voice than like Freddie Mercury, and
It's funny you
and
brought up he would probably be I would have gotten to that answer, and I'm gonna
okay,
I'm gonna grab yours. I'm gonna second your nomination with that.
go
Uh,
Freddie.
yeah, I mean that's a really good. I mean, talk about somebody who just he had everything. He had
Yeah,
the charisma, the artistic, the ability to just see things. Uh, Artistically, he saw things his own way, and he was surrounded by people that did the same thing. They were all very unique in their own way, but he was definitely the entire package. So
yeah.
I would definitely I'm gonna borrow when you guys aren't gigging with your dream band. I'm gonna borrow
Oh,
Freddie from
nice.
my dream band, and then
Okay, nice.
yeah,
All
we'll
right.
we'll just work out schedules later.
Yeah, that's just good, man. Well, we just
Mm,
overlap. I mean, Freddie had the
yeah,
the the power to do year round gigging. That's all good.
yeah, yeah.
All right, so now to lead guitar, man.
Lead guitar,
Who'd you have on your poster on the wall?
dude. Well, let's see. I had when I started hanging up posters, it was a lot of the late 80s, the hard rock uh kind of stuff. I think I actually, if I remember correctly, the first poster that went on my wall was a Bad Company poster
Oh
that my
wow. Okay.
sister had. Yeah, I have an older sister. She's not much older than I am. And I think I ended up getting that poster from her. Uh yeah, so that would be the first poster, but as far as guitar players in my dream band, it's hard to narrow it down to just one, isn't it? That's what makes this a great question. It's hard to
Yeah.
narrow it down to just one.
Well, here's what I
Yeah.
guarantee this is what'll happen. If you give me one right now, it's
Yeah.
3:09 on Tuesday, the 21st. Tomorrow at 3:09, you're gonna be like, oh, of course, it's XY guy, or it's gonna be somebody different because you're gonna listen to something and think,
Of
the
course.
genius,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I mean, if you
Yeah.
if you had Malcolm as your rhythm guy and you didn't have Angus, would that work? Because you need Malcolm and Angus together, right? But
I I
I mean,
think so, but this is already, I mean, is Malcolm and Freddie Mercury gonna work together? So who
right,
knows? Yeah.
right.
Um,
That's true.
yeah. Man,
Yeah,
there's
I
been
would
so many.
if why don't you ask Snake what he thinks when you're talking to him next, just say, "All
Okay.
right, what should I have said?" Right? But,
Yeah, yeah.
but if we went through your list, I mean, so we were talking about playlists, right? And your daughter
Right.
introduced you to some stuff and you were into Olivia Rodrigo. If you hear those session guys, any one of those cats that's down there at A&M Studios or Henson
Oh,
Studios,
yeah.
in LA, like Justin Derrico, plays with Pink, and I've seen him in the
Yeah.
studio a bunch of times, and I'm like, oh my God, what can't that guy do? He's got the
Yeah.
country licks, he's got all the shredding metal licks, he can do sweeps and all the tapping and everything you want.
Yeah.
And so, when you got pop artists like Pink out there with a band that every single guy in the band can do every style of music at the highest level,
Right.
then yeah, like you can really, there's no wrong answer, to the
Yeah.
dream band thing. But
Yeah. So and you hit the nail on the head too. It's the not only are they very diverse musicians, but they play it authentically. So
Right.
it's one thing to say, so we're getting into to the drum stuff, but you go from the rock world and then you get into some shuffle stuff and then maybe jazz or something like that. Well, it's one thing to be able to play it, but to play it authentically and to play it
Oh,
in the style and really capture that style, that's what's impressive to me. And
yeah.
the physical ability to do it and be diverse is impressive as well. But then the extra layer, that last missing component is, can you play it and really play that style authentically?
Right.
And it's a rare thing, but it's it's pretty impressive, to be quite honest
Yeah.
with you. It's intimidating. I think
Not everyone is Vinnie Colaiuta out there, right? So,
you're exactly
right.
right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
um, were you like, I mean, like, the age old drum question of Bonham versus Neil Peart,
Okay.
were you a fan of both of those guys or
So,
either of those or the other over the other?
yeah, Bonham is a big, uh, he's a big influence slash inspiration for me. I The Rush catalog, it's funny. I think I connect with Neil more as a lyricist. His
Right.
drumming is amazing, and the drum world would not be what it is without his contribution. But he's not an influence of mine. I don't play that way.
Yeah.
I haven't gone in that direction with it. I appreciate it when I hear him do it, but it's not something that I've spent time going in that direction or trying to emulate. So I don't say that as any kind of criticism at
No,
all. He obviously, the drum world would not be what it is without him. So he's
sure.
incredibly important. But when I start reading some of his lyrics,
Yeah.
that's where I'm really just blown away by what he did and what he contributed to that band. And then you start reading, I don't know if you've read any of his books, when you
Oh
really start
yeah.
reading about him as a person, he's a fascinating person, but I think his drumming is probably at the bottom of the list of things that really resonate with me. And again, please, I'm gonna get a bunch of hate from the drum community and
I don't think so. I don't. I
okay.
really don't, because
Okay.
I think people get. I mean, my son. It's interesting. My son worshipped Neil. Right. My son's
Okay.
25. Rush was everything to him. Neil was certainly his favorite. But I had that conversation in Hanson Studios, right, with
It
all the guys in The Voice. They
Yeah,
Nate
okay.
Morton, the great
Nate
friend of
Morton,
mine.
yeah. I
Yeah,
have
Nate.
yeah, yeah.
Nate.
My
Nate
old
brought us
band,
in.
okay, go ahead.
Oh, well, so we were in the studio watching them track stuff for The Voice, and Nate comes in the studio and he's like, "So what'd you think?" And my kid goes, "It's not Rush." He goes, "Yeah, you ever heard of a guy named Vinny Colaiuta?" And my son's like, "Yeah, my dad talks about him all the time." And he goes, "Well,
Yeah,
there's a reason." And so he
yeah,
said, "Let me show you something at the break." And we go out to his car and we listen to 2 hours of obscure Vinny stuff, right? Really like unbelievable
yeah,
polyrhythmic stuff, and
yeah,
across the board, right? There's nothing that Vinny can't do.
right.
And my son's listening to it in the back seat, and he's going through his Instagram, and he just looks up and he's like, "So show me his lyrics." And then Nate's like, "Touche. All right." And I loved it that was my
Yeah,
kid's direction,
yeah,
and I think, for me too, musically, Bonham is the big influence on my playing.
yeah,
Not as a not character reference. Probably, I wouldn't want to be Bonham's. His demeanor, and
sure,
he's
sure.
not somebody I would have brought home to,
Right.
like. But your mom, your girl would not have wanted Bonham coming home to meet mom. But
Probably not. Yeah.
I get what
Well,
you're
you've
saying though.
never
I
met my
mean,
mom, though. I say that, and maybe it would have been a big night at our
oh,
house. Who knows? Who
yeah.
knows? I hope
That's
my mom's not watching this.
that's for the
Sorry, mom.
podcast part two, man.
Yeah.
We'll have to chat about that.
Sorry, mom.
No, man. You're really close to well, you mentioned supporting the support of parents, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So and you talked about how you weren't pushing your daughter in any direction musically. What kind of support did you get from the folks growing up playing music?
I didn't realize it at the time, but both my parents were incredibly supportive in completely different ways. When you're a kid, you don't get it. You don't
Yeah.
realize, you're just a kid. Both my parents were really supportive in my small town. the guys that I was playing in a band with throughout high school, I was the guy who had the garage that we were able to practice
Mm.
in and make noise, and my mom would drive me to and from gigs. My dad would take me to the music store to buy my first drum set. He got me out of school early one day to take me to a music store, and my dad is actually to blame for the whole music thing in general because he took our family to see Roy Orbison in Buffalo, New York, a place that it may still be there. It's called Melody Fair, and it's a theater in the round, so it's a rotating
Oh,
stage.
sweet.
Yeah, so and that was kind of the moment that I remember. I actually remember it vividly. It's been a lot of years, so I don't want to say I remember it like it was yesterday, but I remember it vividly. I remember going as a kid and not when you're a kid, and I was really young at the time, but I didn't know who Roy Orbison was. I knew the name, I knew some of the music that my dad played around the house, but I was doing my gig as a kid and just convincing myself that I don't care about my parents' music. I was
Yeah,
just stubborn and just blocking all that stuff out.
sure.
So when we went to see the show, I didn't realize what an icon Roy Orbison was. I didn't realize that catalog of music, how just incredibly important that whole catalog of music was. That was stuff I
Right.
didn't figure out until years and years later. Uh, but I just remember kind of being mesmerized by the whole thing and just like seeing the excitement of it all and the way people were responding to it and reacting and the lights and the it wasn't even just the drummer specifically, it was the whole thing that just
Yeah.
kind of changed the direction of my life. I laugh and I joke with people. There were two really big deciding factors as far as me going in the direction of pursuing music, and it was my dad taking our family to see Roy Orbison, and then I think it was I think it was the summer between my freshman and my sophomore year in high school. I I played football throughout junior high school and I I played sports when I was a young kid. And then I think it was the summer between my freshman year and my sophomore year, I came back to school in the fall and everybody around me had doubled in size and I didn't. I was still this
Oh,
scrawny
damn.
little kid and I'm like, "Okay, drums, drums. Yeah, I'm not playing football anymore. I'm done."
That was
Uh,
it, really? What position did
yeah,
you play in football?
well, so I played, so I was a cornerback for a long time because I
Okay.
was a small kid. I
Yeah,
guess at that point, I was kind of I guess I was quick. I don't know if I
yeah,
was really, I don't know. I wouldn't say I was like lightning fast, but I was quick and I was small. Uh, so that position, I certainly wasn't qualified to be a lineman, even when I
yeah.
enjoyed playing and was playing. Uh, yeah, so I played for a little bit in junior high. And then, like I said, I came back to school one year in the fall, and it was like I was just looking up at
Ah,
everybody around me. I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll just stick
yeah,
with drums for a little while and see what happens.
that's well,
Yeah.
you've made a longer career than most people could with football, right?
Well,
Are you an NFL
yeah.
guy?
I'm really not. As an adult,
Okay,
I enjoy I mean I enjoy a game
sure.
occasionally, but I'm not emotionally invested into the outcome, which is kind of the best way to watch sports, right? When you're not emotionally invested into it, you can just have fun with it. I really
Yeah.
unfortunately at this point in my life I don't follow it too closely. So
Well,
my
don't
dad is still a diehard Bills fan,
I was
as
wondering.
most
That's what I was gonna
oh
ask
yeah.
'cause it's
Yeah.
it's a cool Cinderella story, sort of, their
Yeah.
quarterback right now coming from Wyoming and,
Oh yeah.
like from he just, he's, such a natural talent, and it's cool to see them potentially going to the Super Bowl. It'd be nice to see Buffalo
Yeah.
get but
It's crazy to see even from somebody who doesn't follow it closely, it's crazy to see what an impact he's had on just the culture of the city. He's really just
sure.
come in and made his mark. Uh, is it all good? I don't know. I'm not qualified to speak on
Well,
that, but
a town like Buffalo, I have a lot of respect for areas like that. We've done a good handful of shows there this last year.
okay.
We played there quite a bit, and Um, Buffalo, Detroit, cities like that, they're the culture that's in the city, right? Hard work and blue
Yeah,
collar. They've
that's
certainly
it.
they've had their asses kicked in some
Oh
terms.
yeah.
Like the economy has been tough. You look at like the
Mm.
90s was a tough time for both of those cities, right? So you
Right.
see some areas that gentrification has helped, but you don't want to lose the culture and the spirit that made that city unique.
That
And so
you're absolutely right.
Atlanta
It's
too, you're in Atlanta, same thing, right? It's very
Yeah,
similar.
I mean, it looks different, and what's to me, it's kind of an anomaly because it's hard to find somebody that's actually from Atlanta,
Right.
but at the same time, Atlanta has if you spend enough time here, it does really have an identity of its own, but
Each
but
area.
it's yeah,
Honestly, each little quadrant, because we were
you're
in
right.
Buckhead, I mean, we did the Buckhead Theater recently, great place,
Yeah,
I love that venue, but
yeah,
a lot different than Chastain, right? You've,
of
playing in
course,
Chastain
right.
Amphitheater, uh, and but I interrupted you there, but I was gonna say, like, each of those places has their its own culture,
Yeah,
and 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 really, I think there's pride in those areas that wants to retain that, the culture without outside influence. Even though you said that there aren't a lot of people that are from Atlanta, people
right,
in their 15, 20, 25 years, they don't wanna
right.
lose what's really made
That yeah.
special for them.
So I think this is normal, but when you maybe you relocate or life takes you in a different direction, and when you land, using Atlanta as an example, when you come here and you first get acquainted with a new area, and it might be over the course of a few years, you're going to lock into what resonates with you and speaks to you. You're going to find that, you're going to lock into it, and then if it changes in 5, 10, 15 years, there's always going to be the nostalgia for, well, it's not my Atlanta anymore.
Right.
Well, that's kind of in a lot of ways, that's part of the charm. It's still evolving, it's still growing, it's still changing. Uh, but I'm guilty of being nostalgic for the way things were
Sure.
when I latched onto it initially. But you're talking about Buffalo and Detroit, and there's something about the northeastern part of the United States, and it is that blue collar mentality. You've got a lot of old, I say steel towns, but that
Yeah.
culture. You mentioned Detroit, obviously the automotive industry, and I mean talk about the music culture there and the history
Yeah. Oh my
and
god.
yeah, it's a really it's a unique part of the country in a lot of ways. There's a definitely a mentality uh, to to being in that environment. You talk about the sports teams, and we're talking about the Bills, and I'm jumping all over the place here. But so many people in an area like that, that was their escape. So it was
Yeah.
very hardworking blue collar people. And what do? Well, when you're done with a hard week of work, you rally around your sports team,
Right.
and people in Buffalo will tell you it's meant to be played outdoors. I don't care what
Right.
the temperature is. I don't care what the weather's like. Football is meant to be played outdoors in the
Right.
winter, and that's still alive and well there. There's a lot of oddly enough. So they're going through the process of building a new stadium for the Buffalo Bills, and you talk to people up there, and there are people that get upset if you even mention the idea of football being played indoors,
Oh,
retractable roofs, and all those types of things. And I
right.
know
Yeah.
it gets crazy with the NFL and all that stuff. But I say all that to say there's a really unique mentality uh, to that part of the country, and I
Yeah.
appreciate it a lot more now that I'm an adult. But I that was
Yeah.
all lost on me when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, it makes sense that I mean, we all sort of latch on to things that are both nostalgic and important to values. You become a parent, things are a lot different
Right.
after you become a parent.
Right.
If we're
The
all
whole world
yeah,
changes. Yeah.
yeah, right. I mean, oh, wait, what's the coffee cup? What's the label on the coffee cup there?
I wanted to go Portland. I knew you were in
Oh,
Portland,
look
so
at
that's
this. I am.
so can you see?
Yeah,
I know there's a glare on it.
CC Motor
CC
Company.
Motor Company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, buddy.
I wanted to show my Portland pride.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So have you
Of
gigged up here
course.
quite a bit?
Not as much as I would like to, but I have a list of some cool spots that I absolutely love up there. And I'm a motorcycle guy outside of the music world. I'm
Oh,
a coffee
nice.
nerd. So CC has been one of my favorite places for a very long time. And I was actually bummed well, I guess a handful of years ago now, they closed. They had a location in Reno, Nevada, which was really super cool as well. But I knew that
Nice.
on this particular, I
Yes,
wanted to
sir.
show my
That's a
Portland
good
pride.
I appreciate that, man.
Of course,
We'll have
of course.
if you do come up this direction, I'll certainly be able to, show some spots, we can what bike do you ride?
So, at the moment, I have 3. I
Okay.
have a 1975 Honda 400F, that's been
Okay.
rebuilt and restored. I refer to it as my moody girlfriend because when it's cooperating, I absolutely love it. That's not always the case, but that's what you get with a vintage bike. That's half the
Yeah.
fun of owning a vintage bike. And I've got a newer Harley Softail that I love, and I just recently acquired a Triumph Bobber, which is kind
Wow.
of yeah, that's kind of my that's the bike that I'm most enamored with at the moment. But we'll see. That'll change again
Okay,
in six
let me
months. Yeah. Are you a bike
ask you
guy?
this.
Are you
You know what? I had a bike in Montana. I was
okay?
19. Somebody blew a stop sign in front of me, totaled my
Oh
bike
boy.
and me, and I
Oh
decided
boy.
at that point I'm gonna stay away. I loved the ride, man. I loved it
Yeah.
so much, and my girl rides, and she's a Harley girl, you know.
Okay.
So, but um, I had this conversation with my son, and I was thinking about it when you're talking about your bikes, because your eyes light up, and I remember
Y-
that light. And
Yeah.
when my son really wanted a bike in high school, and I said, "Man, listen, especially right now with people on phones, they don't look," which is what happened with
It's
me. But this is,
yeah.
and I thought
It's that's a reality that sometimes it's a risk that I've accepted for the time being. But you're right. You're right. I wish I could argue with you, but I can't.
if your daughter came to you and said, "Hey, Pop, I'm gonna get a bike. I want that to be my first ride."
I've done a lot of things that I don't want her to do, so so we'll just go ahead and put that on the yeah. We'll just go ahead and put
Yeah,
that on the list. Yeah.
I get it, man. You know what? I I really feel, especially after having watched a couple of interviews with you, I feel like you're the guy that you and I could talk all flipping day. I could talk to you for
I
days on end.
that's
There's a million things.
so we'll
So we're
schedule a part two. Yeah. If you're
let's
up for it,
do
we'll
it.
schedule a part
Yeah,
two.
I think we need to, and
Yeah.
we're going to be hanging at the NAM show in a couple of days, right? So have you
Yeah.
figured out your
Yeah.
schedule for the NAM?
So I will be at the convention center Friday and most of the day on Saturday.
Okay.
I really don't have a structured schedule. Like everybody else, I have my list of people that I need to check in with.
Yep.
But my schedule is pretty flexible. So at some point, when we're offline, I'll get together
Yeah.
with you
Okay.
and just yeah, I'll shoot you a message and we'll coordinate a time to get together because I would really love to catch up in person.
Shout out to Chad Brandolini and Vader Sticks, right? I mean, we're both Vader guys, right? So,
We are, yeah.
so
Yeah.
we hopefully be seeing Chad.
Yeah.
You're a Pearl Drums guy.
I am Pearl Drums,
And so,
yeah.
because a
Yeah.
second ago I interrupted you. You were starting to say something about Nate, and Nate is a very
Oh,
well, regarded Pearl player. What were you going
yeah.
to say?
So, just a fun fact, in 2006, Paul Stanley from
There you go.
Kiss,
Yep.
he did a solo record called Live to Win,
Yep.
and Nate, uh, did the touring for the album, and a band I was playing in at the time, we were the support band on the first handful of shows. So I
Okay.
had an opportunity to meet Nate, and obviously watching him play on television and the things that I've seen, this was the internet wasn't quite what it was back then, but it was
Yeah.
there. So I was aware of him and I had seen him on television. But all of what I was going to say is watching him play in person on stage every night is an
Yeah.
experience. It was awesome watching him play.
My
So that
favorite
was a lot of fun
favorite
for me.
drummer.
Really?
My
Okay.
favorite drummer to watch. I mean, him and Dean
Yeah.
Castronovo, my two favorites to watch.
Right.
Both dear friends of mine. I mean, I've known Dean for 25 years, probably, maybe a little bit more. He's a Portland
Okay.
guy,
I
Salem,
did not
Oregon
realize
guy.
that. Okay. So do you
Yeah.
know Kyle as well? Do you know Kyle?
I don't know Kyle. Kyle.
Okay. His son Kyle, who's
Oh, Kyle
also an
Castronovo.
incredible.
Of course. Yeah. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. You know what?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, like, because your playing reminded me of Kyle Baltus, a friend of mine who was
Okay.
with like stylistically, and that's my mind went right there thinking, if you know Kyle Baltus,
I do
he
not.
like, the band 36 Crazy Fists.
I
They
know the name.
yeah, he was a drummer.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, and they toured. They did a bunch of stuff with like Tommy Lee, with Motley, and he was
Yeah.
and he was sort of like Tommy, like a younger Tommy Lee protege,
Okay.
which you're playing on Monkey Business reminded me a lot of as well. So like that was the full circle thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Back
Well, I'll have to check
back
him
to
out.
Nate, and
Yeah.
back to like, but Nate, favorite drum to watch, and we've had this great conversation. He's the one that I was talking to, right, about my son and Vinny Colaiuta, and he told me great stories about the Paul Stanley tour and how they
Oh,
rehearsed for
great.
that thing. And Sasha, playing bass, and then Hoff on guitar, and
Yeah.
Paul
So that was
Merkovich on
the
keys, right?
that was the whole television band. Am I
Right.
correct
Yep.
in remembering it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
Rockstar Supernova, Rockstar In Excess,
Correct.
Rockstar,
Yeah.
and then on to The Voice. But he was saying that Paul was the music director, telling Paul Stanley, all right, we're going to do these rehearsals. Band's going to be there at noon. I'm remembering only parts of this in terms of timeline, but he said, rehearsal at noon. We're going to do a couple of days rehearsal for this tour. Show up. The band will get all this stuff together. If you want to show up at like 3 or 4, we'll have everything dialed, and then we'll
Okay.
just run through things a couple of times. Paul Stanley comes in at noon with everybody else, hits it hard from the drop, right? From the
That's
very first
great.
thing, he's just singing at 100%. And Paul's like, Paul, hold on, man. We got this tour ahead of us. You
Right.
got to take it easy, right? Because we're going
You
to
got
be
to
going
save
out.
some for the ring, Rocky. Yeah, got to
And
save some
he's
for the
like,
ring.
you know, I got two. It was something to the effect of, I got 2 speeds, and it's on and on more. And it was like basically saying I'm on a 10 or I'm on an 11 all the time.
Right. And
There's no, I'm not half mast.
yeah, that's exactly the kind of answer you'd want from Paul Stanley. So
Totally.
yeah, and to share a quick story. So Skid Row, there's obviously been some crossover in the Skid Row timeline with Kiss throughout the years. And as
That's right.
recently as last year, we did a handful of dates on the farewell tour in Europe supporting Kiss. And having seen it firsthand, I can tell you a lot of people, the internet's going to do what the internet's going to do, and a lot of people like to say a lot of things about Kiss and the operation recently and the live shows, and it's so many people go in so many different directions with it. But I'll tell you this, having seen it firsthand multiple times, it's hard to find an organization. When I say an organization, it's hard to find a unit, those guys who put in as much effort and work as they do.
Oh
Those
yeah.
guys, that just doesn't happen on accident. Those
Right.
guys are committed and they work incredibly hard every day, putting in a lot of hours to be the people that you see up there, and their whole day, what they go through and the things that they do, it's really impressive to see what they were able to invest into at this point in their career. Yeah,
You're
so I'm
absolutely
not
right.
surprised to hear you say that he's only got 2 speeds.
You know, First, you brought me back to a couple things really quick. Yes, I saw the very first Kiss farewell tour with Skid Row opening in 95,
We are the only
20,
band that yeah,
30
we are
years
the
ago.
only band that has the distinction of being on both Kiss farewell tours 20 some years apart, where yeah.
Yeah, it was 1995. That was 30 years ago, right?
Uh,
Yeah.
well, it would have been early 2000s. It would have been so
Was
they did
oh
a
okay. Oh,
yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah,
Yeah, you're right. My
yeah,
apologies. Um, but uh, the so the other thing was at the show
mhm,
2006. Is that right? I'm trying to think, or 2005, because um, I worked the show doing a bunch of work with Doc McGee. They brought me in, and I
okay,
was helping do a bunch of promotional stuff for all of the European dates. So they had
okay,
a European leg of the tour, and they were going to do all the station IDs and all the ads. So from
right,
the beginning of the day, we did time lapse video capturing the entire stage setup. Then you see the band come in. I interviewed the band where they're putting their makeup on, all putting their own makeup on, just like they did in 1970s, right?
yep,
And then they would do the meet and greets, and watching
yep.
them, like just like you said, the entire day was spent dedicated to all aspects of the show. There was never a
It's
time
it,
where like Paul and Gene, they were like, nah, I'm gonna go take a nap. That never happened. They were
yeah,
up.
I don't know when they would have time to take a nap.
They,
It
it
just
was
doesn't
crazy.
happen. Yeah,
And that, from the drop, man. I mean, and Doc was there too. Same kind of thing. Doc McGee was
yep,
walking around doing all the business and handling contracts and dealing with radio and press and promo stuff. When they did the ads where they would say, "This is Gene Simmons from Kiss, and we're going to be playing Amsterdam on whatever day," they would they were so on. They had cue cards but never looked at them,
right,
and they did like 50 station IDs for 50 different cities and 50 dates. without even looking at anything other than the date. Okay, this is going
Yeah.
to be August 21st. We're going to play at this venue on August 21st. Looking at
Yeah.
the camera the whole time, never off.
Yeah.
I've
And if
never,
you've ever tried to do one of those, I can speak English relatively well
yeah,
until I have to do one of those, and it takes me like 5 takes to remember the name of the city, or I'll get the date wrong. All of a
right.
sudden, I just completely, yeah. So if you've ever done one of those, you know what I'm talking about.
That's a lifetime
Yeah,
dedicated to their promotion. I mean, I
absolutely.
props to them. Like you said, I mean, the internet
Yeah,
will crucify them without having any understanding of really what goes into
of
that
course.
machine.
Yeah,
But
yeah. You
you
don't
know,
have to like it, but I tell you what, they worked hard for it for sure.
and they're laughing all the way to the bank. They didn't. So Gene
They
doesn't care what
probably
we all
are.
think.
Yeah.
So, man, Rob Hammersmith, brother, this is awesome. I love hanging
Yeah.
with you. It's good
This is
stuff.
great.
And
This is
your
great.
your poor wife and daughter having to wait this whole time, probably to have some dinner. But
I'm sure they left an hour ago, so they're not
it's
waiting on me.
all right. Good, man. When if somebody were to go out and keep an eye on what Rob Hammersmith is doing in the prep for new singer, and maybe they want to hire you for some sessions or anything like that, how do they get a hold of
Sure.
you?
Yeah, so my only social media platform is Instagram,
Okay.
and it's at Rob Hammersmith. I'm not hard to find.
Okay.
And then all things Skid Row, all the usual outlets, skidrow.com, at official Skid Row on Instagram, Skid Row on Facebook as well. So we're out there, and I'm on, as I said, on Instagram, Rob Hammersmith. I'm not hard to find.
There you
So,
go. There's a link right there on the page.
oh, nice, nice,
Yeah,
thank you.
yep. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and uh, and so we're gonna see if we can track down Steven Tyler to come out of retirement, right? So he's gonna do his
I,
audition,
okay.
and if that doesn't work, I got a guy for you. So you and I are gonna chat offline.
Yeah,
But
I'm gonna think about this list too,
okay,
and when you and I see each other in a couple days, we're gonna reconvene, and then yeah,
I love it.
we'll
I
catch
love
up.
it.
Great.
And as far as business goes, for me, I'm going to tell people that came here a little bit late, do me a favor, go to the youtube.com/@accesskevin, subscribe to this channel. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern, I've got Matt Bissonette, amazing bass player, played with Elton John all the way back to the days of David Lee Roth and prior, brother to Greg Bissonette, but he's definitely a rock star in and of his own right. And next week, my buddy Tommy Two Tone's going to be on the show. He's got a brand new record out. And so we'll be chatting, doing some live stuff as well. If anybody wants to track down Rob Hammersmith, make sure you hit Instagram.com/@Rob Hammersmith. And Rob, you and I will be seeing each other in a few days at NAMM. We're going to take over.
So we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it.
I love it. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. And again, thanks to 5 Star Guitars. I will see you guys tomorrow, 5 o'clock.